Thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Chad Forsey and I am the Executive Director at PennCEF. PennCEF was founded in 2018 when a group of Pennsylvania policymakers, business leaders, and academic leaders came together to stake our claim as the conservative voice for energy in the Commonwealth. We believe in open markets and we believe in free enterprise. We proudly state that energy diversity is good for all of our citizens. We don't denigrate Pennsylvania's legacy energy industries like natural gas and nuclear. We do believe that clean and renewable sources like wind, solar, and biomass ought to have equal access to markets. Land rights are a necessary component of a free and democratic society. We believe that farmers and property owners ought to have open access to energy development. Economic development and jobs are the hallmarks of our movement. In Pennsylvania, clean energy jobs currently stand at 90,000 plus and are growing at a rate of 6% annually. National security must be preserved. More diverse and local energy here at home means greater resiliency in the face of foreign attack and freedom from endless overseas conflict. Today's event is one of a series of events taking place across the country in honor of National Clean Energy Week, and we appreciate NCEW, the Citizens for Responsible Energy Solutions, and the Conservative Energy Network, of which we are a member, for their leadership in this important week. And now I'm going to introduce our guest for today's town hall. From 1981 to 1987, John Lehman served as Secretary of the U.S. Navy. As the Chief Executive of the Navy, he was responsible for the management of 1.2 million people, an annual budget of $95 billion, and total assets equivalent to those of the 7 largest Fortune 500 corporations combined. Dr. Lehman spearheaded the creation of the 600-ship Navy during the Reagan administration and has been credited for his leadership in winning the Cold War. Prior to serving as Secretary of the Navy, Dr. Lehman was the president of Abington Corporation, served on the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency, and as a senior aide to Dr. Henry Kissinger at the White House. Dr. Lehman also served in the U.S. Air Force and Navy, including while he was Secretary of the Navy, and piloted just about every type of aircraft in the Navy's arsenal. Dr. Lehman is a founding partner of the John F. Lehman Company. Immediately prior to forming JFL Co., Dr. Lehman spent 3 years as a managing director in corporate finance at Payne Weber. He additionally serves as chairman of the Princess Grace Foundation, as an overseer with the School of Engineering at the University of Pennsylvania, on the Leadership Council with our organization, the Pennsylvania Conservative Energy Forum, and he has served with the National Defense Commission and on the 9/11 Commission, which we will discuss today. He was educated at St. Joseph's University, Cambridge University, and the University of Pennsylvania, where he received his PhD. And so at this time, I'm going to turn things over to our Harrisburg director, Dr. John Story, and Dr. Lehman.
Thank you, Chad, and Dr. Lehman, welcome. Let me just turn it over to you, Dr. Lehman, for a moment, and tell us where you are and what you're doing these days.
Well, thank you, John. It's a great pleasure to be here, and both in Pennsylvania on the program and here in Idaho, where it's to 27 degrees. So, Chad, I want to thank you for reading that, or not reading, I know you know it by heart, that introduction that my mother wrote for you. That was very nice. So it's a pleasure to be part of this. I was so pleased when you all got organized back in 2018, and I'm very impressed with all the progress that you've made in PennCEF in that short time. So keep up the momentum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lehman, and we thank you. You serve on the Leadership Council for PennCEF. Been very involved in helping us with various activities, and so we appreciate your support with that. Let's just start with a question. Early in your career, You served with the National Security Council. You worked for Dr. Henry Kissinger under 2 presidents. During your time working with Dr. Kissinger and on the National Security Council, was energy and energy policy a challenge for the United States, and what solutions were suggested in that time period?
Well, energy indeed underlay almost every part of our national security activities as we were winding down and ending the Vietnam War. The Middle East was a primary focus of the country's national security establishment. And Dr. Kissinger and his staff were very, very much involved back and forth in diplomacy. You'll remember the shuttle diplomacy between Egypt and Israel and Syria. And the focus on the Middle East, while it was often the spotlight was on our relations with Israel, the real fulcrum of American relationships in the Middle East was the Persian Gulf and the oil. We were utterly dependent on Persian Gulf oil, and so that required us to maintain the capability to protect the countries that were suppliers to the free world, and so that was a major focus. But also nuclear power. There was a considerable support to develop the fail-safe versions of nuclear power that MIT was working on and the Energy Department. And it was before the technology that enabled fracking and getting at tight oil and gas. So that was not part of the, except in scientific circles, that was not part really of the policy dialogue. But thankfully, the industry and the science was able to develop those technologies, because we only could dream of energy independence in those days. Solar arrays were in their earliest periods of development and were very expensive, as were wind farms and other biofuel technologies. So we did not see in the foreseeable future at the time the possibility of energy independence. It was a dream because we knew it would solve so many problems that bedeviled all the free world, because the Persian Gulf area was so much always in turmoil from various sources. So it's a much greater, more optimistic outlook today. And now we've been able to keep the peace, to protect American interests in the Gulf, but not without serious devotion of blood and treasure.
Well, thank you. And we'll get into a little bit more some of the recent developments in technology. But moving along, you served as Secretary of the Navy under President Ronald Reagan. And many of us still look back at the Reagan years very fondly. But tell us a little bit about what it was like to work with President Ronald Reagan, if you would.
Well, he was really a pleasure to work with. I've worked for directly Presidents Nixon and Ford, and I've worked around the 2 President Bushes and President Clinton, and of course most recently with President Trump. Really, Ronald Reagan was an amazing person, because you have to be very tough to reach the presidency. Politically tough, and yet he was one of the nicest people, the most friendly and considerate of other people, of any of those presidents that I have worked for and worked around. And he just was always considerate of whomever he was dealing with, and always had such a ready wit, usually at his own expense. I was bringing an important foreign military person in to meet with him one day, and he stopped at the entrance to the Oval Office as we went in, and he said, I was up in New Jersey yesterday, and every place we visited had a sign, "Washington slept here." So I'm sure after I'm gone, there'll be a plaque right here on the Oval Office saying "Reagan slept here." And he was always ready with that kind of wit to relax the people, because everybody, for the first time who was coming into the Oval Office was nervous, and he always had something to say to put them at their ease. He was also very loyal to the people, to his people. As long as he was confident they were their compass was pointing due north, and that they were loyal to him, he always backed them up. And in Washington, that's rare, and it's important to exercise to really get policy done, because whatever the initiative, there are always begrudgers and naysayers in Congress and the media and so forth, trying to block whatever it is the cabinet members are trying to do. And never once did he not back up his cabinet, sub-cabinet, when they were in controversy for the right reasons.
Well, thank you for that. And let me just stay linear in the time. We talked a little bit about the 70s and the 80s, and during the 1990s, of course, we had the Gulf conflicts. And what were the challenges with troops getting fuel in the Middle East, and how have some of the recent technologies solved some of those problems?
Well, just as one statistic that lets you see the scope of the problem, for every ton of fuel that we had to deliver by air, we burned 10 tons of fuel to get it there. And people forget, the Middle East is far away. The Persian Gulf is far away. And of course, to get a tanker full of fuel there has its own challenges. So it's a difficult area of the world to operate a large military or naval force. Things are better today because the C-17, which is our principal heavy lifter, is much more fuel efficient than what we had during the several conflicts we had in the Gulf. Actually the propulsion of the naval ships and of the Air Force logistics are much more efficient than they were in those days. But it's just the wrong place for us to have a vital dependency. And every time there was a potential conflict, there was never any questioning of the assumption we would have to prevent a disturber of the peace, whether it was Iran or the Soviet Union or Saddam Hussein. we had to go to war to protect our vital source of petroleum, and so we did very often have to resort to the use of force at great cost. So energy dependency on that area was a great vulnerability, and soaked up a lot of resources in the all the way through the Cold War and the post-World War II era.
Great. So moving into the 2000s, we all remember, I'm sure you do, where we were when we heard about the events of September 11th, 2001. And shortly after that, our Pennsylvania governor, Tom Ridge, was asked to serve in the Bush administration as the first Homeland Security Secretary, and he named you to the 9/11 Commission. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience on the 9/11 Commission, how the findings of that commission influenced your ideas regarding energy in the United States?
Well, the 9/11 Commission, in a way, was unique in really modern history, because we had 5 Democrats who were selected for being active, loyal Democrats, and 5 Republicans who were selected because they were active, loyal Republicans. And we all the Republicans went into the effort fairly confident that it was President Clinton's fault. And all of the Democrats went into it fairly confident that it was all George W. Bush's fault. And none of us thought, when we began the effort, that we could ever reach full agreement on the causes and the recommendations for fixing the vulnerability. And so we built a staff of 82 professionals from inside and outside government, and we interviewed over 1,000 people over that less than 2 year period, and including both presidents mentioned, and all the secretaries of state involved, and CIA directors, and all of the CIA analysts, and all the specialists and military leaders and so forth. And we started from the beginning to say, look, we're not just going to publish a telephone book, a typical government printing office effort of the hundreds of commissions that had preceded us, which nobody ever read. And we were going to publish a book that would read like a thriller, because of the events that it would cover. And we expected it to be a very successful commercial book, so that it would get the widest possible readership. And so as we went through these hearings and interviews and investigations and deliberations, we ended up in complete unanimity. It became clear with the immersion in all of this data and interviewing of the people involved, that the causes of this catastrophe were very visible and identifiable, and not really subject to argument. We had plenty of debates, but we had a completely unanimous agreement on what the causes were, going back 200 years, and what we had to do to remedy the vulnerabilities that were glaring still after 9/11. And as a result, we produced a book that reads like a novel, except it's 100% truth. And we made 42 recommendations, about last count, about 32 of them had been carried out. And the book, by the way, is still it was a runaway bestseller and is still selling quite well, because not a single thing has emerged in the years since that would cause us to change anything in it. So it was a great effort that shows, number one, that it is possible to have bipartisan uh, uh, action together to move this country forward. And second, it is possible to deal with the kinds of threats that we had. And the greatest threat we found, really the root of this disaster and others before it, was our dependency on Persian Gulf oil. This is what fueled the establishment of Al-Qaeda, and it is what has given Al-Qaeda the credibility and the resonance throughout the Middle East to recruit young jihadists and to turn so much of the Islamic world against the United States. So that was a lesson we all learned and felt very strongly. Energy independence, it was absolutely necessary for us to raise to the top of our national agenda. And all of us from the commission, staff and members, have been really working ever since to keep the momentum going. And so I think the 9/11 Commission will go down in history as one of the most effective bipartisan efforts ever.
I breathe a sigh because I kind of yearn for that landscape where there is bipartisan efforts that are working for the good of the country. I'll get back to that, but just to piggyback on something you just said, you said you and others are doing what you can to maintain the effort. What is your personal involvement in energy?
Well, for one thing, I don't have any financial interest in it, and my investment company in New York does not have any. Well, I guess we do have one or two in the environmental cleanup, but not that we have. I'm in it really because of my my national security career. It is so essential to move forward with energy independence and with new technologies in clean energy. And, we have been fully supportive of fracking and of the wider use of gas in energy creation, and especially, of course, alternate sources, including solar and wind and nuclear. And it's very unfortunate that the new technologies that have been developed in nuclear that can make it affordable and fail-safe have not gotten sufficient support, because nuclear should be part of our energy system. But on a personal basis, I have put in a solar array like we see behind you in 5 years ago or so in my farm in Bucks County. It's been terrific. It's been fault-free. It's been a very good investment, but I think it's important when I'm also working in Washington, lobbying on a pro bono basis, helping to educate members and staff on why this is so essential. But for me to be recommending part of the commission that recommended everybody in the country take these efforts, it seemed to me it would have been hypocritical if I didn't do something in my own personal life. And I'm so glad I did, because it has been very successful on our farm.
And I've been to your farm. It's beautiful, and I think the solar values from an economic, from a social, and even an aesthetic point of view are all positive. But I know you ran into some problems with your solar panels, and I think you had some problems with one of your neighbors, and the township had some issues. So tell us a little bit what you can about those problems and how you work through them.
Yes, we did have some people that really objected to it more in principle than on the actual siting of our array. We built an array that was large enough to cover all the needs of our farm. We have an active farm. Uh, we raise corn and soybeans and birds and what we're proudest of is we've really established a growing awareness that there are immune American elm trees to be had, and we grow them. They're immune to Dutch elm disease, and we are helping, I think, to repopulate the country over time with these gorgeous trees that have basically been eliminated by Dutch elm, and now they're coming back. But in any case, the problem is more sudden change. People are used to driving through an area and seeing green pastures and cows and things like that. And then suddenly, if there's a solar array, they say, wait, this is not the place I love. Even though, as you can see in the array behind you, that solar arrays meet all of the classical measures of beauty. They are symmetric. They are a dark gray color that blends in very well with almost any environment. They're balanced, and however, it needs to, when a solar array is put in on a Pennsylvania farm, as an example, it is important to consider the environment and to see that it is sited and blended with the environment that is there, because there's no more beautiful state in the Union than Pennsylvania. And so adding another piece of what is an attractive classical aesthetic piece of equipment takes, it needs to be part of the architectural aesthetic of the individual site. In our case, we put native evergreens around it in a planned way. And from most areas you can't see it. I wish more of it could be seen, but the field that it's in does not lend itself to having it completely visible. But to the degree it is, it's very attractive and symmetrical. So I don't see anything inherently problematic in the aesthetics of solar arrays. It depends on how they're placed on the site. Even the largest, you can cover an entire pasture with solar arrays. If it's done well and done properly, it blends in beautifully. And as far as barn roofs, I mean, it's the perfect placement. We have an old, a very large Pennsylvania Dutch barn, and I plan to put solar arrays on the roof. I have a slate roof now, so it's a little hard to do, but as soon as I have to get it repaired, I'm going to repair it with the new technology. It's constantly, the price, as you know, has been coming down at a steady pace, and the practicality of it, because then now they have solar array shingling for roofs. That is beautiful, I think. And there's the technology. I mean, it's you have publicized so well because I read it in different areas. How many? I think it's up to 90,000 jobs have been created with these new alternate energy technologies, and it's continuing to grow and will grow even faster and further.
Yeah, that's just in Pennsylvania, the 90,000.
Right, that's what I was talking about, just Pennsylvania. It's very exciting, and I think that the next step. Well, I've talked about the need for energy independence because of all of the conflicts it's drawn us into at great expense in blood and treasure in the Persian Gulf. But the other just as important dimension for national security is our adversaries today, and there is a new Axis agreement now between China and Russia and Iran, to where they're now exercising all over the world together, replaying, the late 30s in 1940 when the Axis agreement was agreed to, and that enabled Japan to go to war. So that they are interfering. That Axis is every day planning and exercising, hacking into our energy grid and being able to shut it down. And they can shut it down because it's evolved over time. The tremendous growth in our economy has driven it in many different areas of the world, the country in different ways. Our Pennsylvania grid is quite vulnerable. And the answer is to harden it in a number of ways. And a lot of this is underway. But the most important part is to decentralize it. And to decentralize it, make it much more robust, is to have effective energy storage, both for large industrial arrays and for farms and for homes. And that technology, one of the leaders in that technology is right here in Pennsylvania. EnerSys company in Reading is one of the leaders of these systems. And the different kinds of energy storage and sources, the ions of various hard metals is showing great promise across the board. So now you can buy like the small walls that they build for solar energy storage that will enable, after an attack from abroad or internal, it won't have to shut down the entire grid instantly. It will be far more robust, and gradually we can get to the point of it being really immune to full systemic failure. And we need to continue to work on that, because we are going to become, our economy after this lockdown is over is going to start growing again at least 2% a year. And we are going to need more and more energy, particularly as more electric vehicles get on the road. You saw, no doubt, that they announced that with California's effort to ban all gasoline vehicles in the future, that this will increase the energy needs by 25 to 30% just per state. If we were to go to, well, of course, that's not going to happen in our lifetimes, I do not think. But it is going to have an impact in Pennsylvania. It is having an impact, and we need to be able to deal with that. And energy storage at the local level and at the industrial level an essential part of that.
So I know, having followed Ronald Reagan, Reagan did a lot to build up the military after the 1970s and what happened then, and you were part of that. I'm kind of hearing you say that there is a correlation between a strong national diversified energy source, national security, and even that we're a safer country as we become more energy independent and we have the opportunity for the military to be off the grid.
Absolutely, and nothing could be more important. And within all of the military services have extensive research going on to enable them to use alternate sources of energy to free them up from the dependence on the logistical tail that that they're currently tied to. So, but the political ramifications are worldwide for relationships where we have to compromise what our best interests are in order to be able to import petroleum products. Just the ability to be immune to that kind of embargo or shutdown, as happened in '74 and other times since, the ability to shut down our whole economy by blocking imports, that's no longer going to be a vulnerability. And we're almost there as we speak.
Right. Yes, I got my driver's license in 1974, and I remember being in line every other day for gasoline for many hours a day in New Jersey. So, if and I think you do, but there is overall a lack of an energy strategy in the United States. And what would you advise our executive and legislative branch to do to really develop a national energy strategy that would be good for the environment, that would be good for the good for economy, and good for national security? What kind of national strategy would you like to see us and advise us to move toward?
Well, that's really a key question and a good one, because my favorite political saying is Edmund Burke's, that all that is needed for evil to flourish is for good men and women to do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important that citizens speak out. There are a couple of really important bills which you could explain briefly now before the Pennsylvania legislature. And it's time for people to say, send their congressmen, their assemblymen, their senators, let them know that they care about this, that we need energy independence, not just in Pennsylvania, but the legislature's got to free up all the obstacles that exist right now in Pennsylvania for much more widespread and affordable alternate sources like solar panels and related storage issues. And then from a national point of view, the issue always boils down to leadership. If we don't elect leaders like Tom Ridge, for instance, at the Pennsylvania level, that are willing to help and press at the national level for a national policy. And you're right, there is none. It's episodic. It's a problem of Republicans and Democrats. And nobody's declared that we are going to be energy independent as a policy. And so it's important to have a coherent national policy, not dictated from Washington, but an objective and a strategy to get to where we need to be environmentally and, more importantly, national security, or as important, national security, and put the encouragements in deregulation and where necessary, and helping industries to get established. So you're right, you put your finger on it. There is no national strategy, but the people can speak, and they need to write and write their newspapers, op-eds, the internet. This is a key, and it covers every aspect of American life.
So you're right, we are involved here in Pennsylvania. There are some legislative efforts being made. And before I ask this question, I'd remind those that are with us that we are going to now transition into some questions that you have submitted. Feel free to write those. Just click on the Q&A at the bottom center of left of center at the bottom of your computer. Type that in, and we will be asking those questions. So one of the pieces of legislation, Dr. Lehman, that we're involved in here in Pennsylvania is House Bill 531, a mirrored Senate bill that deals with community solar. That is, as the legislators have recognized, we've had a hearing recently, not too long ago, in the Consumer Affairs Committee, and it was this is revenue will not require any revenue from the Commonwealth, and will actually, as investments and money is spent, bring tax dollars into the coffer, which both parties seem to like that aspect of it. But you know, the regulation, I mean, right now that needs to be dropped is that a solar panel like yours, or a larger one, is for your property only. And so I think, and you helped us with an op-ed on this, how would you say the ability to share your array, whether you're a farm, you're a business, or a private resident, benefiting the economy and the environment?
Well, absolutely. It would be like going back. It is kind of regressing to when farmers didn't have the logistics to share their crops with anybody else. They just could grow what they could for their own consumption. Now, of course, that's going way back. But to enable neighbors, particularly in agricultural areas, to pool their resources and share the product, it's just common sense, and it can do so much to really alleviate the problem. It can't be handled necessarily block by block. It's where it really makes sense in agricultural areas. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. So the next question, and I'm going to release you from any hesitancy you may have because of political correctness in answering this question, because I don't think this is something I've discussed with you. And I would, the caveat here is PennCEF does not take a stand on this particular issue, but as individuals, we can and we should. So Dr. Lehman, do you think the current climate change crisis should require a national transition to renewable energy?
Well, again, these are my principal focus is national security, but the environment is a part of national security. And yes, I do believe that it is important to see these measures are supported and enacted, so that it sets a standard for the world. The real problem of pollution, as we know, comes from China and India and the developing world. But we need to lead the way by action, not just by, so, the counter that the Chinese have made to our hectoring them rightly on their pollution. They've got something like 11 or 12 coal-fired generating plants under construction as we speak, that we can't be hypocritical and say, well, you're just trying to interfere with our economy. So we need to show the way, and it makes sense from every aspect.
Good. Thank you. I'm going to bring Chad Forsey into the next question for you and he to perhaps answer together. And the question is asking, what is PennCEF doing right now? What lobbying are we doing in this regard? And if you bring Chad into the screen, that'd be great. But I would say this, PennCEF is a 501c3 organization. We're nonprofit. And so there are regulations around how much lobbying we are able to do. So primarily PennCEF is an education group. You've not heard us on this town hall today talk about we should vote for or anything like that. And we tend to stay away from that. And so while we are able to do a certain amount of lobbying, we're primarily educational in nature. So Chad, just ask you, what is PennCEF involved in right now that's current and pressing on this clean and renewable front?
Yeah, thanks, John. So the first item has already been discussed, and that's House Bill 531. And so let me just give the folks a little bit of background on this bill. House Bill 531 establishes a community solar program in Pennsylvania. It will enable, as we've discussed, it will enable multiple farms, businesses, or residential property owners to come together, do a single project on a single property, but to own it and operate it and profit from it as a group. This does a number of things. One of the first things that it does is it helps groups of landowners to come together and leverage the investment dollars that are required to put up a substantial solar array. And we believe that if this bill passes, that it's going to be a significant help, first and foremost, to our farms. And by the way, that's why the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau has endorsed this bill. And I'll give our organization some credit on that as well. Until PennCEF came along, nobody had approached the Farm Bureau about House Bill 531 or community solar. One of the problems in our partisan climate in Harrisburg and Washington is that environmentalists don't necessarily talk to agricultural groups, or if they do, that it's hostile. And it's been that way in the past. So one of the things that PennCEF did when we came on the scene is we realized right away that community solar could help farms. And so we jumped in. We spent a lot of time working with the Farm Bureau and convinced them over time to endorse this bill. The bill, we believe, would bring right off the bat upwards of $2 billion into Pennsylvania from private capital to invest in the new community solar marketplace. So it would have a significant economic effect. And we don't need to remind the folks on the call how important that is in economic recovery post-pandemic, that we are able to leverage new sources of investment in Pennsylvania. So where is the bill at? So the bill was actually introduced 2 years ago. In fact, there was a version of it that was introduced 4 years ago. I've been working on it in my entire time with PennCEF, and there are those on our leadership council who've been working on it longer than that. You would say, this is a great bill. It simply cuts some red tape. It doesn't cost the government anything, and it will spur investment dollars. What's the problem? Well, you'd be surprised how difficult it is to pass a bill that does some good things, and we've learned that. Now, the chairman of the committee where this bill is currently housed is a gentleman by the name of Representative Brad Roy. He's up in Erie and Crawford County, Pennsylvania. And, he was kind of a tough nut to crack on this bill. John and I have met with him probably 5 times in the last year and a half, including a trip up to his district to meet with him in his district office in Crawford County. We actually ran a poll in his district because one of the things he told us initially is, the voters aren't that interested in the issue. So we decided, well, let's find out if the voters are interested in this issue. So we ran a poll at great cost, thanks to our PennCEF supporters who helped to fund that, and interviewed through that polling 300 voters, sample of Republicans, Democrats, and independents in the district, and found that 81% of the folks in that district support community solar. They like it. We showed that to the representative, and he thought about it, and then within the pandemic hit. So post-pandemic, as we've started to climb our way out of this thing, people getting back to work, he said, you know what, I'm going to hold hearings on this bill. So that was a huge breakthrough because initially he was hesitant to hold the hearings. The hearings were held just a couple of weeks ago. I testified. We had representatives from the Coalition for Community Solar Access who also testified. Leslie Elder doing a great job with that organization, good friend of ours. And so we think we're getting close to a vote in committee and potentially then a vote in the House. We are running out of session days right now, but we do think there's going to be a lame duck following the elections. There's too much budget work. Anybody who watches Pennsylvania politics knows that the budget situation is a real mess right now. So we believe they're going to come back into session after Election Day and do some more work. We think there's time to get this done in 2020 in the House and in the Senate. John and I have worked tirelessly. Most of the Republicans that are co-sponsoring this bill in both the House and the Senate are doing so because we had meetings and did some candidate education with them on the subject. So I will say to those who are supporting us, thank you. There was nobody doing this before John and I and our leadership council said, hey, we need a conservative voice on energy in the halls of Harrisburg. So that's one bill. Now there's one more bill I will briefly mention that we're also supporting, that's also pending in, as a matter of fact, the same committee, Consumer Affairs, which is House Bill 592. It was introduced in the Senate by, Senate Bill 592, introduced by Bob Mensch, Republican senator out of Berks County and Montgomery. And Senator Mensch, he wants legislation that would help the Commonwealth to plan effectively for electric vehicles. We don't have enough planning in place to double or triple or quadruple our capacity of electric vehicles owned by consumers in Pennsylvania. We have a tax issue related to how our roads and bridges are paid for, which is primarily from the gasoline tax. And so if we're going to have and ramp up electric vehicles, we need sufficient planning, and Senate Bill 592 would allow for that. And so Republican Senator Bob Mensch has led the way. By the way, I failed to give credit to our friend Representative Aaron Coffer, who led the way on the community solar bill, another Republican. Republicans have led the way on this stuff, and we are proud of that. And for those who aren't up to speed, John and I are working hard to educate them on this subject because, again, jobs, national security, land rights, and economic development are the hallmarks of how we approach this issue in Pennsylvania. So I've talked a lot, but those are two key pieces of legislation that we're working on right now.
Thanks, Chad. So, Chad, I know you well enough. You've been listening for most of this. I'm going to let you ask Dr. Lehman the last question.
Okay. So, Dr. Lehman, to kind of wrap this all up, I guess what I would like to ask you is, what are the challenges and the opportunities as we look to the future in national security relevant to energy? And I'm glad that you brought up China, Iran, and Russia, because doing my foreign policy reading on the side as a citizen, I've read a lot recently about this growing threat, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, but also in terms of resiliency, establishing more domestic energy, and what else is needed.
Well, of course, we've talked a good bit about the need for energy independence, and I think we've covered that well. But what people don't realize is that the reason we're seeing a much more ominous behavior from China, Iran, and Russia is that our ability to deter, that is to, deterrence depends on our ability to convince our potential adversaries that they would suffer far more from taking military action than they could ever hope to gain. And that has frayed for a number of reasons. Number one, the foundation of all of our national security is the strength of our economy. And the absence of vulnerabilities like Persian Gulf oil presents to us. There are other vulnerabilities as well that they are well aware of. We are losing almost entirely our nuclear technology and industrial base. And we're losing it to China and to Russia. Russia has some 75 reactors, basically using technology that they stole from us around the world. And we have none. And China has some 40 or 50 and growing. Both China and Russia are growing their industries at a rapid pace because we're not in the game. We're not able to bid on any foreign contracts, let alone our own nuclear industry. Virtually all of the reactors in the energy grid in this country are either going along the path of decommissioning or adopting a plan to decommission in the foreseeable future. This provides a real number of vulnerabilities. For instance, our submarine force is totally dependent on the nuclear industry. Our carriers are nuclear fueled. Our ability to defend against nuclear attack from the extensive nuclear arsenals of Russia and the growing arsenal of China, and eventually, and perhaps not too far off, Iran, depend on our having a viable nuclear industry. And we are out of that business. And so that greatly encourages the axis that we face. So energy is the lifeblood of our economy, and as such, it's the lifeblood of our ability to deter our enemies and potential enemies. So nothing could be more important than what you are doing.
Dr. Lehman, thank you for your time today. We know you're there in Idaho during quarantine. We hope to have you back in Pennsylvania pretty soon. Do you know when you're headed back?
I'll be back Friday.
Okay. All right. Well, Pennsylvania will be a safer place as of this weekend. We appreciate it. And, you know, I can't, I'd be wrong if I weren't to thank you for your service to our country, your continued counsel to our power structure, for your support of common sense, clean and renewable energy. So thank you. Thank you for your time today, your involvement with PennCEF, and safe travels later this week.
Thank you. And thank you for hosting this. It's been very, very encouraging.
Great, thanks. And Chad, I'll turn it back to you for a little bit more about PennCEF and to wrap things up.
Well, thanks, John. Thanks, Dr. Lehman. As we wrap it up today, I just want to thank those who have joined us. For those who weren't able to join us, there's a recording of this conversation, which will be placed on our website. We'll have it on our Facebook page, and we'll have it on YouTube. And so we believe there will be many more views. In fact, Dr. Lehman did an interview that resulted in a commercial for PennCEF some months back, and we've had over 50,000 views of that video. In fact, we had over 50,000 views of that video in the first 2 months. on our Facebook page. So we know that when we repost this content socially and on our website, et cetera, that people will see it, it will be watched, and it will influence the conversation on public policy. So we want to thank everybody again. Check us out on www.penncef.org, and you can contribute to us there. If you like this content, you want to see more, well, that takes donations. And so we appreciate folks who go there and contribute. Again, you can reach John and I on contact information is there on the screen with our email addresses. If you asked a question today and we didn't get to you, and I know there were a couple, we will answer those offline to the best of our ability. And we look forward to reaching out to you all in the future with more events like this one. So thanks again, and stay tuned for more.